prosecutors are arguing that the defendants may not have wanted the victim to die, but they consciously engaged in conduct so dangerous that they accepted the risk of death occurring. Now, as you transfer this over to the United States, it could be akin to manslaughter, it could be akin to gross negligence, wrongful death. Waivers are meant to not only alert you to the risk, the inherent risk that may happen, but also it provides a little bit of legal protection for the company or the operators that say, hey, this is an assumption of the risk situation in which you understand or are assuming that you can be injured during this activity. Where waivers kind of don't support this protection is when there's gross negligence, something super egregious that happens.
Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Medico-Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. I'm Lawyer Nik. I'm with Dr. Long. And today we have another viral moment, a tragic viral moment that a lot of our viewers and a lot of our listeners has probably seen. And it relates to the bungee jumping incident that happened in Brazil over the last couple of weeks. Long, I know that this is something that ends in a fatality, but I want to be able to discuss the legality of it as well as the medical, what we can see as far as injuries that are usually sustained during bungee jumping, and see how far off the reservation this incident landed.
Yeah, it's such a freak accident, and to be able to see it on social media and literally everywhere, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, it's been definitely making the rounds. But to be able to see what happened actively, and we're going to show the video here, it kind of sends chills down my spine just thinking about how and what was going through the woman's mind. And she probably didn't even realize what was happening until the very end.
I know you and I have both traveled across the globe. We've been to a lot of different countries. And when we're in those other countries, and even in our own country, we partake in these recreational activities. I've been bungee jumping. I've been ATVing in other countries. I've done rappelling in Costa Rica. I've done ziplining in Mexico. When you're in a foreign country, you don't really always know the standard that is being taken with the equipment or how well trained the individuals are. But there's always this thing in the back of your head. If everybody's doing it, I should be safe. I should walk away from this unscathed. And in this situation, it just wasn't.
I've always had bungee jumping as something that I wanted to check off my bucket list. Maybe it was a little bit of that adrenaline junkie, but it's also because a lot of my friends have done it before. But this really gives me pause, and I've really rethought it. And it's like, yeah, I really don't think I need to do it. I'd rather go skydiving, which I personally would consider a little bit safer. It really made me rethink what is on my bucket list and what I would be willing to do moving forward. And if I were to do it, I'd make sure all the safety nets were in place before anything were to take action.
Well, let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and share the video and then we'll discuss.
And obviously for our viewers, there's not going to be anything too graphic. So we want to make sure that we put a disclaimer out there for anyone that may be triggered by this video.
This incident is currently going viral on internet. A 21-year-old girl tragically dies in Brazil during bungee jump after workers forgot to attach safety rope before 40-meter bridge. In the video, you can clearly see three men ready to throw her off the bridge, but there is no rope attached to her. This kind of incident is rare because bungee jump is considered as an incredibly safe extreme sport. But due to some minor mistakes, accidents happen.
Long, before we get into our feedback of what happened, I want to go over some of the details that weren't discussed. So this took place on June 13th, 2026, and the victim was Maria Eduarda Rodrigues de Freitas. She was 21 years old, and this took place at a place called Ponte de Esqueleto, which is called Skeleton Bridge in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She was participating in the bungee jump activity, and she was launched from the bridge without being attached to the safety rope. The fall height was about 40 meters, which was 130 feet. Ultimately, she suffered fatal injuries and she died after the fall. Now, there was an investigation, and we'll get into that more, but I just want to get your opinion of it. Tell me what your initial reactions were when you saw it come across your feed.
Obviously, I thought of who was there with her. I dug a little deeper and I found out that it was her fiance that was with her who was holding the camera and watching. I heard that he fainted after he saw what had happened. We can see the rope that's just sitting there on the ground. So I don't know if we're using the correct term in terms of bungee jumping, but This is a different type of extreme sport, they were saying. I don't think it's exactly a bungee because the rope is meant to tighten and then kind of swing back and forth rather than bungee you back. It doesn't propel you back based on all the different information out there. But of course, in shock, just to see her get thrown off like that, and then just the visceral feeling of that could be a lot of people. This is the one that we're seeing now, but how many other accidents have happened with this crew, this location, other places that are doing these sort of same tourist events?
You're right. It was more so of like a rope swing where once you're released off, you'll swing back and forth and get that adrenaline rush of falling through the air. And ultimately, the rope or bungee is supposed to catch you. When I saw it, my first reaction was, how did the operators not notice? It was very clear from the video that she wasn't attached to anything. And as I mentioned before, I've done bungee jumping, I've done rope swings at amusement parks, I've done all this stuff in all the different countries. And one of the things that I, as a person, am always paying attention to is, am I being hooked up appropriately? Is the rope there? Are they using proper safety measures and safety procedures? I feel like a little bit of it is common sense where you understand, hey, I need to be attached to something in order to do something. But also when you're in the midst of an adrenaline rush like that and you got nerves and you might be scared or nervous or excited, it's easy to miss. But how does nobody else, whether it's a bystander or the operators, notice that she's not attached to anything? I feel like that's clear as day.
It makes me wonder if there was something that threw their routine off. The three people that were there that were meant to check every step of the way had a misstep because maybe they were distracted. Maybe there was something that happened in those moments leading up to that. I wonder if the way that she was getting thrown off, was that the normal process? Is that something that they normally do? Or maybe she would requested it and therefore it threw everyone off their usual routine of checking here and there. And so by her requesting that, they're now having to change up their process. There's just so much more information that we're waiting to come out. It's tragic on all parties involved. I'm curious to hear about the legal side of things because from what I've seen, there were two that tried to run. Obviously, helicopters were able to find them. But I want to know truly, is this a criminal case at all because of the intent? It doesn't seem like this was intentional in any way and it was not meant out of malice. I'm curious whether or not that changes the court of law, whether you're in Brazil versus the US and vice versa.
It definitely changes. Many people assume, at least in America, that our law is the same law that carries over to other countries or other regions of the world, which is not necessarily the case. Every country has their own constitution. Every country has their own set of legal standards and legal codes. So, of course, Brazil has their own set of laws. Now, I dove into it a little bit, and from what I saw, 6 people were arrested, but 3 of them are now being investigated and or charged for homicide with eventual intent. Under Brazilian law, this means prosecutors are arguing that the defendants may not have wanted the victim to die, but they consciously engaged in conduct so dangerous that they accepted the risk of death occurring. Now, as you transfer this over to the United States, it could be akin to manslaughter, it could be akin to gross negligence, wrongful death, so on and so forth. Wouldn't necessarily amount to murder, but there's that standard there of, well, your act was so egregious that somebody died, so now there's both civil and criminal liability.
And so I'm assuming in the US, then that would change the sentencing, whether you get a longer sentence versus a shorter or how punitive it is based on that intent and what the jury or the judge decides. From my understanding, just from what we've talked about in the past, that is a really important part of the case. Is that right?
For any law, one of the first things that they teach you in law school and that you really lean on as a practicing lawyer is that most legal code or laws have what's called elements. In order for something to violate that law, you need to meet these elements. Lots of the time, intent is one of those elements. Trying to find out if somebody intentionally did something, if they unknowingly did something, if they unintentionally did something, those are usually written into the laws. And that can end up changing what your charge is. And then to your point, it could change what sentencing is. And granted, laws change from state to state, but in any given state, you could have a murder charge that could result in 20 years to life with possible death penalty. You could have a manslaughter charge that might just be 5 to 10 years or 5 to 20 years. There's different layers in these laws as far as the elements, and trying to show if something was unknowing, unintentional, intentional can definitely vary up the repercussions of those actions.
And the evasion of the arrest, does that play a part in terms of severity of sentencing and judgment too, especially if it were happening here in the US? Is that something that is taken into account if you are trying to evade arrest?
So it depends. Lawyer answer, it depends. Sometimes there are laws on the books where the evasion of the arrest in and of itself is a violation of a law. So you can add different charges on by evading arrest. In other areas, it could show maybe intent or it could show mindset. You can use that as a totality of the circumstance argument, especially when you're in court. There's a difference between somebody harming somebody and running versus somebody harming somebody and trying to administer aid. And so those can show the different mindset of the individuals or the operators that were doing this. Want to go back to a point that you made. We look at this, and granted, I'm going a little off the reservation, but there is a world where you could argue that them throwing this woman off the bridge without a harness could be intentional in a hypothetical where maybe this was an enemy of hers. Maybe it was people that didn't like her. Maybe it was somebody that knew that they really wanted to kill her, and the best way to cover it up was to go jumping and just conveniently not attach the rope. Or you could have some operators that were 16-year-old kids that just didn't know any better, forgot to do something because they were distracted, and then it still ends up in her death. Overall, the different layers can definitely add to different sentences and different punishments.
And so, a similar question, I want to dig a little deeper. The three people that were involved, the three that are in the video, I would assume that they would not get the same sort of sentencing or judgment because two of them were the ones who actually had their hands on the woman, whereas one was supervising. I would assume that that then plays a role in who's ultimately at fault or who's not at fault and how big of a judgment comes down at the end.
Possibly. Let's switch it up to the procedures and processes. Maybe the responsibility is on that third person standing back to ensure that the safety harness is on. So although the person in the front who is holding up the majority of her body weight as he is helping throw her off the bridge may have partook in the physical act of throwing her off, you might say, okay, well, he threw her off. But really, the liability might land on that third person if they're the supervisor because they were supposed to check for the rope. The front person could argue, I thought the rope was on. In our procedures and processes, it is not on me to check the rope. My primary responsibility is to do A, B, and C. That doesn't fall on my responsibility. And there might be an argument there that maybe the third person is more culpable and more liable than the first person. Maybe they're all just as liable together because the fact that they were all working together, then they all missed it, depending on how they set her up, how they put her harness on, how they engage in the safety protocols. There could be many different ways, and what you're going to want to see is what happened leading up to them actually releasing her over the bridge. Because if there was step A, B, C, and D, we're just seeing step E. I would be curious as to what happened in those preliminary steps.
So, you know how in the US, when we do anything that has any ounce of liability, potential liability that could be passed on, there are always waivers that we fill out and we sign. In this sort of scenario, does that hold any sort of standing? Because there's a reason why people have us sign waivers. I'm assuming that there was a waiver signed when they participated in this. And does this help the three men that are in the video, or does it not help at all? And it doesn't matter.
I absolutely love the fact that you brought up waivers. I find waivers extremely interesting. Waivers are a contractual agreement. Most people don't recognize the fact that, yes, when you go do something like this, you are signing a waiver, but there are other instances of waivers in which, let's say you're entering a theme park. You don't really sign anything when you enter a theme park, but by purchasing the ticket, the waiver's on the back. There's rules and regulations for the theme park. Whether you're doing something and you never sign a waiver or you're actually signing a waiver, usually there's a waiver that exists. Now, waivers are meant to not only alert you to the risk, the inherent risk that may happen, but also it provides a little bit of legal protection for the company or the operators that say, hey, this is an assumption of the risk situation in which you understand or are assuming that you can be injured during this activity. Where waivers don't support this protection is when there's gross negligence, something super, super, super egregious that happens. For instance, when you go on a roller coaster and it has dips and dives and turns, there's a little bit of assumption of the risk that you probably need to be fit and going on there. You shouldn't be pregnant. You shouldn't have serious health problems, I should say, and that you might get jerked around a little bit. There's a possibility of you hurting your neck. There's a possibility of some whiplash, maybe hurting your back. And that's just a general assumption of what the ride inherently brings. Now, what you don't expect is to get on the ride and realize that the theme park or the engineer didn't bolt down the track. And there's a whole section of the track missing, and you're going to fly off the track and ultimately die because the carts all flew off over the hill. That's the difference between the waiver. When you're going through something and it amounts to gross negligence, something so egregious that it wasn't expected, the waiver's not going to protect you. The waiver is not going to protect you from liability. In this circumstance, you expect that by doing a rope jump or a bungee jump or a skydive or what have you, that there's an inherent risk that maybe you might experience some back pain, maybe you might hurt your neck, but you expect the rope to be there. You're not signing your rights saying, yeah, I'm going to do this, but I'm agreeing to the fact that the rope may not be attached. So that doesn't protect the operator, doesn't protect the people going through the safety protocols.
Yes, it sounds like to me the waiver protects the operator or the company if and only if all steps and rules and every normal procedure is followed appropriately, and then there's an issue. That's where it protects the employer. But in this situation where there are missteps along the way, basically we can say we throw out the waiver, it doesn't really matter. They are still liable, and that we're going to go through court and hash this all out there.
Yeah, and another thing is waivers are there as a deterrent, as a legal mechanism to say, hey, you signed the waiver. So let's say that Long, you got injured at a theme park and it was because of my gross negligence. Well, when you come at me, my first response is going to be, you have no claim, you signed a waiver. Now it's on you to then determine, okay, I signed the waiver, but something here is still wrong. I need to go see a lawyer and make sure I could sue. I wonder how many people, not knowing, just say, I guess they're right. I signed the waiver, so I can't sue, and never pursue legal recourse against the theme park or the ballpark or the roller coaster operator that harmed them. It is a legal deterrent, and there are general common sense assumptions in there that you expect the thing to be taken care of. You expect everything to be on the up and up. You expect there to be protocols. You're not agreeing that these things don't exist. You're agreeing that, hey, I might get a little roughed up on this ride.
Yeah. That's interesting because from what I've heard, there was actually an off duty nurse that was there participating and was there when the woman landed on the ground, and apparently she was still alive. But speaking about waivers and liability, this is probably a whole nother conversation, but Good Samaritan laws, the ability for a medical personnel to be able to help someone in public, and even if the outcome is poor, not being held liable because of that outcome. In a situation like this, I always think if I were a medical person there, what am I going to be looking at? What am I going to be dealing with? What are the equipment materials around to be able to support this person in front of me? I can't imagine that nurse's mind, what she was going through, what the training she had, and whether or not she was going to be able to do anything. And I'm really interested on whether or not some of that information will come out here over the next several weeks to months, because I'm sure they're going to want to know what her account is, what her perspective is, and whether or not was it the fall that killed her? Was there something else after the fall? There's just so much interesting medical mysteries, especially when these sort of freak accidents happen.
Definitely. And Good Samaritan laws, one of those areas that gets a little convoluted because you want to encourage the public to render aid, but there's also liability when you do render aid. It's an odd gray area of the law that can discourage a nurse from rendering aid. And especially for those in the medical field, you want to help your patients and do no harm. When you're running into the fire to help somebody, you're not thinking about the possible legal repercussions and the liability that may take place down the road. You're just trying to help that person. And then you come to find out that in a situation not like this, in a situation that doesn't possibly end in a fatality, you're then getting sued because you did something that caused a little bit more harm, even though you may have saved that person's life. Now, I want to ask you, when you're doing something like a rope jump or a bungee jump or something in which you're jumping off something and there's a rope connected to you and it's going to jerk you and pull you and swing you, what kind of ailments or what kind of harm can you end up doing to your body?
Well, first off, I kind of want to hear your account. You said you've done bungee jumping before. Did you have any issues during your adventure there on the bungee jump? Did you have any issues, neck pain, back pain, anything like that? Or did it go fairly smoothly and you were one of the 90% of people where nothing goes wrong?
Well, I did it when I was a senior in high school. I actually did it after prom. And so my body was a lot more put together at that age, a lot more resilient, and nothing actually happened. And it was at a place here in Dallas. And the beauty of it was that it was only like 7 to 10 stories high. I mean, it was an insane bungee jump. And they had a big inflatable pad underneath as a safety protection. So if something ended up happening, you're hitting this almost Hollywood style pad, and hopefully it breaks some of your fall and prevents injury. Everything felt very, very safe. The operators that I recall went through exactly what was going to happen. You hear them calling out their checks. Hey, rope line 1, check. Rope line 2, check. Safety rope, check. There's a lot of procedure there. I felt very safe. And of course, with it being a theme park here in Dallas, you could look at the reviews and see, okay, there's no fatalities here. There's no injuries. This is extremely safe. All the reviews were there. So overall, it was fun. It was exciting. In the same night, we did a free fall drop and we did a rope swing and we did all the other things, and it all went out without a hitch. Now, that's not to say that if I was to do it now, I would probably walk away with severe neck and back pain. I just don't see my body extending like that. But yeah, at the time, it was completely okay.
I've never done bungee jumping, but just thinking about the mechanics of what your body is doing with what force and in what direction really again sends that chill down my spine because I really didn't think about it until this video came out. I always just assumed, you know what, I'm going to go bungee jumping because it's fun. It's something that everyone checks off their bucket list. But when you're tied with a rope to your legs, not only can you not move your legs are stuck together, but then you're getting thrown off the side of whatever you're at, building, wall, bridge. You're going to be fighting gravity as you're going down. And then this rope is then going to suddenly jerk you back up. That alone is going to stretch out your spine and then the spinal cord that lies in the middle of the spine itself, the bones. Depending on if you have a chronic issue, any bony concerns, whether you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, which is weaker, softer bones, that can severely cause damage to the bony aspects of it, whether that is a contusion of the bone, which is almost like a bone bruise, or even a fracture if it was a severe enough shear. Other things, the spinal cord, which is meant to be protected by the spine bones itself, sits inside of it. If everything's getting stretched out and moved around in directions that it's not supposed to, you run the risk of damaging your spinal cord. And now your spinal cord is where all of these nerves that extend from your brain, they go down to the back of your spine and then out into your extremities. Anywhere along the line that nerve comes down from your brain and out, if it gets damaged, that can cause paralysis, that can cause numbness, sensory changes. It's really concerning. Now, as we move out from the bony and the nerve, we're thinking about organs. Our organs are getting sloughed around, especially in your abdomen. Believe it or not, most things are free floating in there, attached by just very small ligaments here and there, but most things are sloshing around. There's not really that much tightness. That's why when you think of pregnancies, a baby's growing in there and they're able to just push everything to the side. So internal organ damage, especially if they are already prone to bruising, bleeding, blood is very thin because of certain medications or certain illnesses like cirrhosis or liver disease. Those are things that are going to increase the risk of bleeding internally, and they may not see that until a later date or later time. Finally, probably the most common thing that we've been joking about is just muscle aches and pain. Anytime that the spine is pulled or your body is pulled and stretched out beyond what it is used to, it's going to cause some micro tears, even partial tears or full on tears, which can cause that sprain or strain and muscle aches and bruising and joint pain everywhere else in your body. But again, with the bungee jump, it can extend from your legs all the way up to your neck because it's all attached.
Man, hearing you say that sounds painful.
I didn't even think about it until this came out. And then medically, now going through like, not only was she not attached, but even if she were attached, what are those things that you could hurt yourself with? Also, it comes with age and then having kids. You start thinking about your well-being and your mortality a little bit more. You're no longer that young teenager or 20-year-old that you think you're invincible.
And that's the difference. If she had actually been attached and all of a sudden she came back with some back pain or neck pain, that's where assumption of the risk falls in and where that waiver might add some protection. You know you're bungee jumping, you know this rope is about to jerk you and swing you. Well, obviously, there's might be some pain here, and you might get hurt from it. But obviously, this was so egregious to not attach the rope that it ended up in her death, her unfortunate death. And so I think it's just a good legal and medical PSA in general. We think in America that theme parks are safe, that fairgrounds are safe. When it comes to fairgrounds, I will not go on any of those rides. Those things are built up, taken down, built up, taken down. You don't know who the operators are. And no offense to the people that work fairgrounds or work theme parks, but from what I've usually seen, it's usually people that are younger, maybe in their teens, sometimes people with lower intellect that this is the only job that they could get. And I don't know if I trust me or my family or my daughter on one of these rides, knowing the level of care that's being taken. Now, obviously, when you're going to Universal Studios or Disney World, you can expect that higher level of care and that higher level of process and procedure. But the other thing is, when we go abroad and we go to other countries, a lot of the times we're looking for those excursions. You go on a cruise and you're about to port, and all of a sudden there's a list of excursions to go do. When you throw in a good time and you throw in some alcohol, all this seems like a good idea. You need to do your due diligence and really understand what you're getting yourself into, while also paying attention to the safety protocols and who's actually putting you through what you're about to do and making sure that it's safe. And if you think something's wrong, speaking up. And sometimes that's hard because there might be a language barrier.
Absolutely agree. One more thing that I want to add from a medical perspective is that anytime you participate in one of these events or adventures, whatever you want to call them, skydiving, bungee jumping, zip lining, anytime that you complete the journey, you want to watch your body. If your body starts telling you that something's wrong, watch it for 2 to 5 days. If it's still persistent, take yourself to the doctor. That's what you've got a family doctor for. It's why you've got a primary care physician. Use them, utilize them, because you never know what's lying underneath until you get evaluated appropriately. Maybe that ache is more than just an ache. Maybe you tore something. Maybe you broke something you didn't realize. Maybe that dizziness or headache, you don't realize that you actually got a concussion. Because again, that shift or that jerk that you get from some of these bungee jumps and skydiving, it jerks your head so much that it can mimic almost getting like you're getting tackled in football. And so that can absolutely cause a concussion. For anyone out there that is doing any of these events, that if you don't feel right 1 or 2 weeks afterwards, please go see your medical doctor to make sure that you get evaluated appropriately.
Any good lawyer would appreciate that advice because what we want to see is a paper trail. If you're injured, we want to make sure that you are speaking up. You are telling the company, you are telling the operator, this happened, that happened. You're actually going to the hospital and seeking care because it leaves a solid paper trail of, yes, something happened to me if and when you need to seek legal recourse and you need to sue.
Yeah. Such a tragic story, but it's always a great conversation with you, Lawyer Nik. I am curious to see where things lead over the next couple of weeks as more investigations come about and more information comes out. But thank you for joining us here on the Medico-Legal Brief. Again, this is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. Make sure you subscribe, follow, like us on all of our social medias. We post our videos every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time. Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.